All right. Yeah, so I welcome all of you back. Last week, we looked at some three ethical theories, and then we also looked at a framework for using those ethical theories to analyze IS situations. This week, we are going to look at something much more bigger. We are going to be looking at privacy and surveillance. And in this lecture, I would argue that privacy and surveillance uh, is a big defining issue of the digital age because almost everything else we are going to be studying, whether it's about algorithmic bias, whether it's about misinformation, surveillance at the workplace, all of this, what we're going to be discussing runs through it. And so our focus will be to work through four key things. And these four things, we will try to understand what privacy really means, and then how data is collected, how is the data taken to surveillance, and then what goes wrong when privacy fails, and then we'll look at a case study. So basically, this is what we are going to be doing. Before we start our discussion, I want to give you just a preview of what we are going to be covering. But whatever we are going to be doing today connects to one main question, one central question. And that central question is, what happens to privacy in a world driven by digital technologies and data? We cannot answer this question appropriately if we don't understand what privacy is all about. So first of all, we will start by trying to understand what we mean by privacy in the digital age. So we'll look at what privacy really means today. And here we will try to emphasize that when we say privacy, are we really talking about keeping secrets, or what is it about? Then next, we'll look at data collection and surveillance. Every time we use an app, or anytime we search something online, or even using our smartphone, we have to understand that data is being collected. Now, the key question is, who is collecting this data? Why are they collecting the data, and how are they using the data? So this particular section will help us to understand the hidden technological footprints that we leave behind. Then we'll look at next the violations and breaches. Here we will discuss what happens when organizations fail to protect personal data they have collected. And then finally, we will look at a case study, a practical case involving issue of privacy and surveillance. And so by the end of the lecture, I expect that you guys would have a clear understanding about what we mean by privacy. So the goal is for you to think critically and apply these ideas about real digital environments in terms of what privacy means. Secondly, you should be able to explain how data is collected, how is the data aggregated, and how surveillance occurs. And then third, you should be able to evaluate the ethical harms of privacy violations. When our data is collected and there is a breach, what happens? And then finally, we will analyze the practical case study, which is the Cambridge Analytica case, using the ethical framework we looked at last week, looking at the ethical theories, the theory of utilitarianism, deontology, and then the virtue ethics. So to hit the ground running, I will start by posing a very important question. And then this question is, what exactly do we mean by privacy? When we say privacy, what do we mean? For many of us, the moment we hear privacy, we are basically thinking about hiding information. But in information systems and, and ethics, privacy is much more broader than what? Secrecy. So when we say privacy, we are not really just interested in secrecy. Privacy is really about control. Privacy is about control. One should have control over what information is collected about you, who would have access to that information, and how it is being used. So if you look at the definition on the slide, it captures what I'm trying to explain very well. It says, privacy is the claim of individuals to determine for themselves when, how, and to what extent information about them is what? Is communicated to others. That's what privacy means. In other words, privacy is about what? It's about choice and autonomy. It's about choice and autonomy. Now, let's pay attention to certain things. You have to understand that privacy has different dimensions. And we want to look at three main dimensions of what? Of privacy. Now, the first one is what we refer to as informational privacy. Now, when we say informational privacy, it's just about personal data. Data about you. For example, your phone number, your health records, your bank details, your browsing history, or even where you stay, your location data. The key issue here, the important issue here is who owns or control that information about your phone number, your health records, your browsing history, your bank details. Who owns or controls this information? Now, the second dimension of privacy is what we refer to as bodily and what? Spatial. Bodily and spatial privacy. For this particular dimension, it is about the freedom from constantly being watched. Constantly being watched, whether physically or what? Or digitally. So I want you to think about CCTV cameras or facial recognition systems or even GPS tracking systems. Even the apps we are using on our phones, they monitor our movements and what we do online. So this one is about what? The second one, which is bodily and spatial privacy, is about freedom from constantly being what? Being watched. Whilst the first one, informational privacy, is about what? Your personal data. Now, the third one I want us to look at is what we refer to as decisional privacy. Decisional privacy. For decisional privacy, this is the freedom to make personal choices. So the third one is about choices. The first one is about personal. The second one is about constantly being watched. And then the third one is about what? It's about personal choices you can make without being pressurized, without being surveilled, or without being what? Being manipulated. So, for example, when algorithms influence what news you see, if you go to say TikTok, and you watch a particular video, the algorithm will suggest similar videos to you. This is what we are talking about. Sometimes you visit a particular website and suggestions are made about what products you should buy. You get that? So I really want you to remember that the statement at the bottom here, which says privacy is not secrecy. It is what? It is rather control. So the issue is not always hiding your wrongdoing, but the issue is who gets to decide how your data is being collected, how your data is being used. So anytime we hear about privacy, privacy is not about secrecy.
It is about you having control about your personal data. That is the first dimension. The having control about what? The freedom of being, you are free from being watched and having control about what? Your decisions, so that you are not manipulated into taking those decisions. So information system, when we're talking about privacy, it involves these three dimensions. It involves these three dimensions. Now, I want us to look at something, because now that we understand what privacy means, the next question I want to ask is, what does privacy feel much more difficult to protect today than it was in the past? In the past, our environment was largely, and we would describe that as an analog world, but now we're in a digital world. In the analog world, data was costly to collect and store because everything was what? Physical. And even the records or the data that was collected, they sat in physical silos, in filing cabinets, locked up somewhere. Now, also, in the analog world, forgetting stuff was the default, because anything that happened, people will forget about it because it will fade away. The difficulty in keeping track with things was there. Also, surveillance needed people to be what? To be visible. If before you could surveil somebody, watch somebody from a distance, you needed to do that physically. You get that? But if you look at privacy today it is so cheap to collect and store data. And when even the data you collect, you can store it forever. Today, the records are linked across different services and platforms instantly. Today, remembering is the default, not forgetting. And that is why sometimes people even say that the internet does not forget. Today, in the digital world, surveillance is automated, is constant. And you are being surveilled, but you don't even know that you are being surveilled. And today's surveillance is global in nature. It's not local, as was in the analog world. So as we are having this lecture, we are being surveilled, or we may be surveilled, because we are using Zoom, an application. And this application, I'm recording it. I have not even disclosed to you whether the recording I am doing is being kept in the cloud. If it is being kept in the cloud, Zoom would have access to it. All these things raises issues about what? About privacy. Today, when we are using apps like Zoom, we can add an AI assistant that will record attendance of whoever was in the meeting or whoever was in the lecture. The AI assistant can record whatever was discussed and then transcribe it and send it to us. All of this raises issues regarding privacy. Now, I want us to look at how surveillance actually works today in the digital world. You see, many people imagine surveillance as just cameras watching us from somewhere. But in today's modern digital world, surveillance is much more broader than that. Usually it would begin, or more often, it begins with an ordinary everyday activity that you will see as harmless. So for instance, this lecture we are having, it may seem harmless, but we may be under surveillance. So if you look at this slide carefully, it shows three steps. Three steps. Now, if you look at these steps carefully, understanding these steps will help us to understand how surveillance happens. The first step is collection. The second is aggregation. And the third is surveillance. Now, if you look at the first step, which is collection, I want us to look at it this way. Every single day, applications or apps, websites, smartphones, sensors, or even digital platforms are collecting data about us. You can imagine the extent to which all of us have used our phones this morning. Think about the kind of information we generate or we have even generated this morning. Daily, the kind of information we generate will involve our locations, our online purchases, our messages, what we are searching, the photos we take, and even how long we look at a particular video. So the important point here is a single piece of data may appear very insignificant to any of us, but it may be significant if it is aggregated and used in a particular way. You see, one search query alone may not reveal much. Just one data point about us may not reveal much. But sometimes too, maybe just disclosing your location. That is one data point, your location. You check in on Facebook that you are here, you are there. To you, it may not matter, but the real power comes in the second step. Someone can aggregate that information and it can cost you a lot. So for instance, if I'm going on a holiday and I am at the airport and I check in on Facebook or social media, when I check in, you would see on my status that my Facebook status will now indicate that I have checked in at Kotoka International Airport. Then I arrive at my destination, maybe in Canada, Montreal, and then the hotel I check in, I also indicated. Now, when this is put out there, I am basically sharing my location information by checking in, and I may think that this single data point may not be very significant. Someone relying on this can create an aggregated data about me and know that, look, since this guy is here, he's not at home. Probably he has traveled with all his family. If criminals use this information, you could be robbed whilst you are away. And in the step two makes it even more poignant. Step two is what? Aggregation. At this particular point, this is where separate data sources are even managed or merged in a way to produce meaningful information. So different platforms are combining information, different platforms are collecting information, and all of this can be used to build a detailed digital profile about you. For example, imagine a company is combining your shopping habits. A company, you go to Temu online, they will collect your data. Your GPS location is collected. You share whatever you have bought on social media, it is collected. Your browsing history is collected. Suddenly, if an organization has got all this information about you, they can infer what you are interested in. They can even predict what your routines are. They can politically, they will know how you are aligned. Depending on what you are buying, they also know your income level, or even because of what you share, the emojis you share, they will know your emotional state. And this is why people often say that these days data is what? Is the new oil. When you hear that data is the new oil, this is what they are talking about. It's not because single data points are valuable alone. We are saying that when you put all these data points together, large combined data set, it can create powerful insights. Then the last stage, surveillance. Once profiles are created about you, organizations can then monitor and analyze your behavior easily, and they can do so continuously. And so the goal may be to predict your behavior, the goal may be to influence your decisions, or even control some outcomes. So for instance, if you go onto TikTok, they are able to predict what you will watch next. They can predict that. So even political parties can use some of the data they collect online to target you as an individual and send you what? Personalized messages. This is what happened in the last elections. People received messages from Baumia, and they would think they received it directly, and the message will address them in a personalized way. All of this explains these points that we are trying to put across. Now, so you see that if you look at the nature of data that is collected, it can be every day we leave data trails when we go online. We leave data trails about our locations. We leave data trails about what we buy. We leave data trails about messages we send. We leave data trails about our search history, and even data trails about photos we take, the emotions embedded in those photos. Locations are embedded in those what? In those pictures. Now, I want to ask you a critical question, an important question. The question is, who is actually driving modern surveillance? Because we're saying that in the modern digital world, surveillance has become what? Complicated. So who is driving it? You see, many of us assume surveillance only comes from governments. It's only governments who are surveilling and monitoring us. But in reality, there are different forces working together in the digital age. And so I want us to group this into three. We'll look at corporate surveillance, we'll look at state surveillance, and we'll also look at what? Surveillance at the social level. And so for the first one, which is corporate surveillance, corporate surveillance is sometimes called surveillance capitalism. Corporate surveillance, when companies surveil or monitor people, it is sometimes referred to as what? Surveillance capitalism. And when we say surveillance capitalism, it is basically referring to companies collecting and analyzing personal data, but they are doing this as what? As a business. Companies collect personalized data, people's data, but they are doing it as a business. A typical example is Facebook. What do they sell? Facebook, they don't sell anything. They only collect our data. But because they collect our data, that's their business model, to collect our data and probably sell it. So they are engaging in what we refer to as what? Surveillance capitalism. Now, if you look at majority of social media platforms and even online shopping sites, platforms that offer streaming services, platforms that offer search engines, these companies are basically tracking our behavior so that they can do what? They can predict what we are likely to buy, what we are likely to watch, what we are likely to click on, or even what we are likely to what? To believe in. So in other words, our attention and behavior have become very valuable commodity. Our behavior, our attention is now very valuable to companies. They are interested in what we are interested in, what we are watching, what we are interested in buying. And so if companies are able to accurately predict our behavior, then it means that they can make profit because they can sell to us if they are able to predict that. So surveillance capitalism. Then the second one is state surveillance or government surveillance or government monitoring. Governments across the world collect communication movement. They collect our communication data, our movement data, and they do that for different reasons, such as to ensure national security, such as policing, even public administration, so that they will be able to provide us with tailored services. Sometimes too, they just do that because they are engaging in intelligence gathering. So some surveillance that governments engage in may be justified for purposes of what? Security, purposes of terrorism. For example, if a government wants to track down a criminal network or prevent terrorism, they will collect information or data about us. But you see, the ethical issue that arises is when does the state surveillance or state monitoring become excessive? You know, sometimes it can become excessive. They are collecting data for some purposes, but excessively they are just invading even your personal privacy. When you are in the bedroom with your wife, you are doing stuff, and they are monitoring and recording everything. Sometimes too, the state surveillance may lack a lot of transparency. They are not making it open, or sometimes too, it goes beyond legal and democratic limits. They will know that they are not supposed to do or surveil or monitor you in a particular way according to the law, but they will go beyond it by breaking the law. And when the government breaks the law, sometimes it becomes very problematic, especially in developing countries. So When that happens, it creates an important tension between the issue of what? Security and even privacy. Because assuming surveillance becomes excessive because someone is suspected to be a terrorist, it creates an issue. And the issue it creates is what? Tension between security, protecting individuals, and what? And the privacy, invading the privacy of the supposed terrorists. Now, the last one I want us to look at is social or self-surveillance or peer surveillance. All of us, if you look at the third part, all of us engage in social surveillance because voluntarily we participate in surveilling ourselves. We participate. How do we do that? Constantly, we share our allocations voluntarily. We upload photos voluntarily. And when we do, we tag our friends. Sometimes we post our personal experiences. Sometimes we even document every day, everything we are doing online. In many cases, we are not only being watched by our organizations, we are also what? Watching one another. After this lecture, you may go and watch my Facebook profile just to see what I have shared online. So that will fall under what? Social surveillance. What we share voluntarily. And we're saying that under social surveillance, we even monitor ourselves. Sometimes you go back to your own profile to check who has watched what you have shared. This happens to all of us. When we share stuff on social media, sometimes we go back to check who and who has watched it. And that falls under what we refer to as social or peer surveillance. Sometimes you have an issue with somebody and you think that that person has blocked you. Or sometimes you have an issue with somebody and you want to send a subtle message across because you cannot speak to the person directly. So you share the message on your status and then you are secretly doing what? Monitoring to see if the person has watched it. To ensure privacy, sometimes the apps will give us the opportunity to turn certain things on or off to protect ourselves. But generally, the three drivers of modern surveillance are surveillance capitalism, when surveillance is engaged or conducted by corporate entities. Then we have government monitoring or state surveillance. And then the last one is what? Social surveillance, where we all engage in. Now, up to this particular point, you see that we have discussed how data is collected and how surveillance may work. But now we need to be able to confront the ethical issues that comes with collecting data and being surveilled. Because the ethical question is, why does privacy actually matter? Why does it matter? It is very important that we look at this. Sometimes people just say that, for me, I don't care. I have nothing to hide. But privacy actually is not about hiding wrongdoing or hiding something. Privacy is about what? Protecting your freedom. Privacy is about protecting your dignity and being fair to what? To everyone. So I want us to look at some of the things that can come up, some of the harms that can arise when privacy is what? Is violated. When privacy is violated. So the first one is autonomy and dignity. When people know they are constantly being watched or they are being tracked, it changes the way they behave. If you know you are being watched, it will change the way you behave. For instance, in this particular lecture, you all know that I am recording the lecture. So interrupting the lecture becomes a bit difficult because we all don't want the lecture, the recording to be done in a particular way. And sometimes too, because we know we are being recorded, if you are going to ask a question, you may first of all write down your question or organize your thoughts very well because you know that you are being what? You are being recorded. So the first one is what? Autonomy. Because we know we are being recorded, our autonomy is what? Is compromised. It changes our behavior. So individuals may feel they may feel in a way because they are being what? Recorded. Now, the second one is discrimination. When organizations build, when they have collected so many data points about you from different profiles, all these profiles can be used in an unfair manner against you. For example, algorithms are able to influence hiring decisions, like we were looking at yesterday in the Amazon case. An algorithm decides to penalize applicants who are female because it has picked data and is using the data in a way. So algorithms can influence hiring decisions. Algorithms can influence insurance pricing, even loan approvals, as we looked at yesterday, or sometimes even policing practices. It can, all of this can be influenced in a particular way. The danger is that biases are hidden in the data, and these biases can reinforce what? Inequality at a larger, on a larger scale. Now, the third one is manipulation. Detailed personal profiles allow organizations to target emotions. When an organization has collected detailed profile, it can let them, it will give them the power to target whatever our fears were. And it can even bias a lot of things. So you think about a highly personalized political advertisement, or maybe an addictive platform designs or recommendation systems. And all these platforms are engineered in a way to influence our behavior. So we are saying that when detailed profiles are kept about us, based on our profiles, based on our online behavior, they can use it to manipulate us. Look at TikTok. What we watch on TikTok is influenced by a lot of things. So you may not like to watch a particular kind of video, but the first time you watch that video, the algorithm realizes that after watching that video, you didn't stop there. You added it to your favorites. You also loved it, and you went and commented some nice things about the video. So the next video you are likely going to see, the algorithm will suggest similar videos. And in that way, the algorithm has done what? It has manipulated you that way. Now, the fourth one I want us to look at is security. You see, when data is collected about us, especially data from organizations which maintains large databases, these large databases can become attractive targets for hackers and cyber criminals, because millions, once we have millions of records and they are stored together, you would see that a single breach can expose huge populations at once to a lot of risk. So security risk is also a problem when we have what? Privacy violations. Then we have what we refer to as the chilling effect. And what do we mean by the chilling effect? You see, when people believe that they are monitored, they may begin to censor themselves. You'll be the fact that you know that you are being watched. You are careful about what you do and what you share. In that case, we are self-censoring ourselves. What you say online is carefully thought of and planned. What you associate yourself with online, you are very careful, because you know what? You know that you are being watched. And this has got serious implications for a lot of things. It has got serious implications for our democracy. It has got serious implications in terms of what? Freedom of speech, what we say. And sometimes it has even got serious implications about academic freedom. So, for instance, in the university, I cannot just go on social media and say anything at all that is happening in UDS. I cannot, because I know a lot of people are watching. Sometimes, because of your status in the organization, what you say carries a lot of weight. And because you know you are also being monitored, your privacy can be violated. It can lead to this chilling effect of being what? Self-censoring ourselves. Now, the last one, the issue of power imbalance. What we all have to realize is that those who hold data about us, they have power over us. Look, if you do something nasty in the comfort of your bedroom with a minor,
or with a woman or with a man without the person's consent, and somebody gets hold of this, that person will have power over you. But for that person to get this particular data, the person may have breached your privacy or violated your privacy. Oh, many of us have seen what is happening on TikTok. Recently, I think about a month ago, a lady came on TikTok on social media and was crying and lamenting on how she had a relationship with a gentleman and the gentleman violated her privacy. Now, the fact that the gentleman violated her privacy, the gentleman actually thought that because he had this data about the lady, he had power over the lady. And this is some kind of power imbalance we are looking at. And this can even happen at the corporate level. And so for all of us, I want us to reflect on the fact that when we are talking about privacy, it is not about you saying that, oh, for me, I have nothing to hide. Whenever you reduce privacy to I have nothing to hide, then you are missing the point, because privacy is supposed to protect everyone's freedom and not just those who are guilty. Okay. Now, when there's a data leak, intentionally or unintentionally, a lot of things happen. And so I now want us to pay attention to something. I want us to focus on one of the most visible consequences of poor privacy protections. When you don't protect your privacy very well, there will definitely be a breach. If you have a lot of pornographic content about your sexual escapades on your phone and you don't have a password on your phone, you can imagine what can happen to you. One day there will be a data breach if someone lays hands on your mobile phone. So when we say a data breach occurs when personal information is accessed, or it is disclosed, or it is altered, or it is lost without what? Your authorization. And all of this can happen through hacking. It can happen through a mistake or an error, or it can happen through what? An insider misuse. An insider can misuse it. So data breaches can happen through all of these things that I have mentioned. But it is important that we all understand that it's not all breaches that are caused by sophisticated cyber criminals. Sometimes maybe you just didn't lock your mobile phone, or you didn't password or lock your laptop, and it can lead to what? A data breach. Sometimes maybe your password is just too easy to guess, and that can lead to data breach. So sometimes too, the problem is not negligence. Sometimes it is just simple negligence. Now, let's look at some of the common causes listed here. Common causes of data breaches. It can be what? Hacking or malware attack. Hacking or malware attack. This one is one of the most familiar things that happen. But data breaches also happen because of what? Weak passwords. Your password is weak, or your systems are outdated. Sometimes too, it is just human error. Your device is lost. Someone picks it. Your phone is not locked, and so he has access to. Or sometimes to negligence, you take your phone to a mobile phone repairer, and he says, "Oh, I need your password so that when I'm done, I can do this." They can have access to your data from there. And so for us, information systems, we are concerned about some of the ethical issues that can result from this. Some of the ethical issues. And so from an ethical perspective, the key issue is not only whether the breach has happened or not. That's not the key issue. But how the organizations are going to respond. When your data is breached as an individual, how are you going to respond? And so if you look at the right side of the slide, that's what we are talking about. The ethical duties after a breach. What should you do when there's a breach? First, organizations must notify the affected individuals promptly and honestly.
if your data as students of UDS, School of Business, is breached, the first thing we should do should be to contact you and tell you that we want to let you know that there was a data breach and your so-and-so data is now in the public domain. But we are taking steps to do what? To ensure prompt recovery and retrieval of all your data. Now, when there is a data breach and we try to hide the breach, it will usually make the matter worse. We are making it worse when we do that. And we may destroy, as an organization, we will destroy public trust in us. Now, when we are looking at ethical issues regarding data breaches, we also have to consider that we have to find ways to work to minimize the harm. Because the fact that the data is already out there, the harm has been done. How do we minimize it? That is what we should be concerned about. And this can involve securing our systems immediately, helping those who are affected by the data breach, and then trying to see how we can provide remedies, such as helping them to reset their passwords and also monitor if their monies have not been taken from their accounts. We also have to ensure that we are transparent in this process. Organizations should clearly explain what happened, what had led to the data breach, what kind of data was affected, and why the breach occurred. Then also, accountability is also very important and critical, because in organizations, ethical organizations would usually accept responsibility rather than shifting the blame or concealing what happened. And then finally, one of the best protections is to try and see how we can minimize data. We should try to see how we can collect less data to begin with. Now, in simple terms, what I'm basically saying is that if organizations collect less unnecessary data in the first place, if they are collecting less unnecessary data, then it means fewer people will be harmed when there is a breach. So we, as organizations, we should always collect data that is necessary, because sometimes the data is so huge, but only a small portion of the data is necessary. But when there's a breach, everything is going to be what? Is going to be out there. Now, you will see that throughout this lecture, my focus was on trying to explain to you what we mean by privacy, and then look at the dimensions of privacy and also how privacy is different in the digital age. We also try to look at how the steps in the surveillance process, how data is collected, how data can be aggregated and leading to what? Leading to surveillance. Then we look at the different drivers of modern surveillance, digital surveillance capitalism. We looked at government surveillance and then social surveillance. Then at this particular point, we then indicated that after discussing how data is collected and how surveillance works, it was important that we look at the ethical aspect. What happens? And we indicated 6 things could happen. You could lose your dignity. You may no longer be autonomous. Your data can be used to discriminate against you. It can be used if organizations collect your detailed profile, they may be able to manipulate you, considering the fact that they can influence what you watch. Security breaches, we looked at that. Then we also look at the fact that because our data is being collected and we know that we are being monitored, it can lead to self-censorship. And then lastly, we looked at the issue of what? Power imbalance. Then we also looked at data breaches and the common causes. Now, what I want us to look at is this, a practical case study of what happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. So I'm going to take you through this case, and then we all look at it and conclude our lecture. Now, basically, why is it important that we look at this practical scenario? It is important because it will help us to move from the theory we are talking about to a real-world example. And this example demonstrates the power and the risk of what? Surveillance. And we are looking at the case of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. This was a very popular scandal in 2017, 2018. This particular case became a global case, very significant, because it showed how personal data collected through social media could be transformed into a political influencing tool. And this is what actually happened. Around 270,000 Facebook users downloaded, they downloaded and completed a personality. They downloaded about 270,000 Facebook users downloaded and completed a personality quiz. What was the quiz about? When people saw this as a personality quiz, on the surface of it, they thought, oh, this is nothing. It's Hamlet. It's just an online quiz. But through the Facebook platform, through Facebook policies at the time, the app was also able to access data from their friends. So what it actually did was, if I answered the quiz, then all of my friends' data, friends who are people who are connected to me on Facebook, they were also able to access their data. As a result of this, information from about 87 million Facebook profiles was reportedly harvested. So initially, they just targeted 270,000 people. But when they got access to the 70,000 people, because of the network effect of Facebook, they were able to target 87 million Facebook profiles. And when they did this, those people didn't know, and they didn't even agree to their data being harvested. And in 2018, this became a big scandal and triggered a worldwide debate about what? Issues regarding privacy, issues regarding consent, issues regarding political advertising, and even what? Platform accountability. Now, the really important issue about this was not simply the fact that data was collected. That wasn't the main issue, because social media platforms collect our data all the time, whether we like it or not. But there was an ethical concern. And the ethical concern was what? How the data was collected. 270,000 people agreed. But when they agreed, the data of their friends were also collected. And this led to 87 million people's data being collected without their consent. Now, Cambridge Analytica, what they did was they allegedly used psychological profiling and behavioral targeting techniques to deliver highly personalized political messages to the different voters. So when this happened, and the people they targeted, they sent messages to them. In the US, they sent several political messages to them. So, and when we say personalized political advert, instead of showing everyone the same political advertisement, people received customized messages designed to appeal to their emotions because they had harvested the data. They sent them personalized informations to appeal to their biases. And this particular case actually it illustrates many of the concepts we have been looking at: how data is collected, how data is aggregated, how surveillance happened. Now, maybe if you have time, you can look at the case in depth. But this is how the data was harvested, was collected and used. They had an app. Then 270,000 people used the app. Then they harvested their friends' data too. And then they built the profiles, came out with their adverts, and then sent the adverts to them. And this was what happened. Clear case of issue of what? Privacy. Now, as we come to the end of this lecture, I want us to take our minds back to what we did last week. Looking at this Cambridge Analytica case, if we go back to last week's lecture and look at the ethical theories we looked at 3 ethical theories. We need to see how we can use those ethical theories to help us to examine this particular case. And so I take you back to the 3 theories: utilitarian lens, deontological lens, and the virtue lens. So last week, when we looked at the issue of utilitarianism,
we were very emphatic about what it means, right? Action that will create what? Overall good than what? Than harm. So if you look at the first perspective, we have to carefully, using utilitarian lens, we have to ask the question, did the action taken by Cambridge Analytica create more overall good than harm? When we apply that to this case, we have to weigh the consequences because a lot of data was collected. People's trust were eroded. They were manipulated. And even that the voting voting patterns were being influenced against any other benefit. So if you look at it this way, you have to weigh, did that particular benefit, did the benefit outweigh the harm? You erode the trust of over 80 million people. You are manipulating the votes of over 80 million people just because you want them to vote in a particular direction. That's the benefit. So if you are looking at this utilitarian view, you have to note that the company may have benefited financially and the political campaigns may have gained strategic advantages. But the harm was huge. The harm was huge. People's losing trust, people being manipulated and all that. And so from a utilitarian perspective, the overall social harm appears to have been far greater than the benefits gained by a small number of organizations or a small number of what? Politicians. Then we move to the second one, which is the deontological lens. And when we are talking about deontology, we are interested in rights, morals, duties, morality. That's what we are interested in, moral rules. We are not interested in consequences. So here, we are interested in rights. So here, the key issue is consent and the respect for persons because they have the right. But in this particular case, the users were effectively treated as a means to an end. Their data was used to achieve a political outcome and commercial objective. And so from a deontological viewpoint, it was very unethical because we have to understand that individuals have a right to control their own personal information and they have to be dealt with or treated honestly. But in this particular case, that is not what was done. So based on the deontological lens, it was unethical for that to happen. Then the last one, which is what? Virtue ethics or the virtue lens. Here, we are interested in integrity, character. What kind of character or values were demonstrated here? Did the organizations act with honesty? Sure, no. Did they act with integrity? No. Were they fair? No. Did they deal with Facebook users with respect? No. But they rather acted with what? Deception. They acted with secrecy and manipulation. So based on virtue ethics too, it was what? It was unethical. And many a times when we come across privacy issues, we have to use these lenses to see how we can analyze them. To see how we can analyze them. Now, if you look at the bottom of the slide, where I indicated that what followed, we have to note that the consequences were very huge, significant, because Cambridge Analytica was eventually shut down. Also, Facebook was fined huge sums of money, and they went through several hearings, and governments around the world started conversations about privacy regulations and data protection laws. So it led to a lot of things. It led to a lot of things, and people started asking questions about how platforms are collecting their data, how they are sharing their data, and how they are even monetizing their personal data. So it is important for us as future managers, as future policy makers, or even researchers or technology professionals to note that when we are designing a digital system, we should not only be concerned about the legal aspect. We should not only be concerned about how profitable it can be, but we also have to be concerned about how ethical and how trustworthy it can be. Very important. My final word is that as managers, as professionals, IS professionals, when systems are being rolled out, we should not just be interested in how profitable it can be, how legal it can be. We also have to look at the ethical aspects and social aspects of it. An important thing that this lecture is trying to emphasize. So to bring my lecture to a close, I want us to look at how privacy can be protected. How can privacy be protected? We have discussed the risk. We have looked at the ethical challenges of surveillance. The next question is, how can privacy actually be protected? The key message from this is that there is no single solution to protect privacy. To ensure privacy, we need law and regulations. We need law. So globally, there are a lot of data protection laws. The General Data Protection Regulations. We have the Data Protection Act in Ghana. All of these are laws and regulations to guide. When we are dealing with an app, we are dealing with anything, consent is very important. And this is also one way that we can protect privacy. Consent. When the privacy is breached, what are the notification rules? Right? And so those who are even monitoring our data, like the Data Protection Commission, they should have the powers to be able to fine organizations when there are data breaches. Right? Then also the second one. The second one is what? Technology and design. When we are developing technology or designing it, privacy should never be treated as an afterthought. If we are treating privacy as an afterthought, it will be later. We'll be considering it later. But when we are developing technology or designing them, privacy should be built into the systems from the beginning. And we call this particular concept privacy by design, or privacy by what? By default. Anything at all we are developing, privacy should be a central team. It should be a central team. For instance, we are dealing with people's sensitive data. Think about issues of encryption and anonymization. How are you going to protect their data in a way that people cannot easily have access to it? Are you going to maintain people's names? You get that. So privacy by design, very important. And also, it is important that we just collect the data we need. We should always be interested in collecting the data we need. Then the last one, the last part, involves people and organizations, because even the best laws and technologies, it can fail if the organizations lack the ethical culture, or if users are so careless online. Whatever law you put in place, how you design the technology, if people are careless, there will still be problems. There will still be problems. And this brings us to the end of the lecture. Yeah. So let me stop recording.